Captain Hyun-woo walked slowly through the dark corridors of the secret base. The massive metal doors were 10 feet thick and covered with warning signs in 7 different languages. His heart beat fast as he held the master keycard in his shaking hands. Behind these doors was something that could change everything they knew about the galaxy. The base was hidden deep inside an asteroid in the outer rim, far from any planets or space stations. Only 3 people in the entire galaxy knew this place existed. Hyun-woo was one of them. Today, he would finally see what was inside the most protected vault in known space. Dr. Soo-jin walked beside him. Her long black hair was tied back and her dark eyes showed both excitement and fear. She was the best language expert in the galaxy. She could read ancient texts that others could not understand. But even she did not know what they would find today. The team had been searching for this place for 2 years, following clues and old maps, finding broken pieces of information in forgotten databases. Every lead pointed to the same thing. A file so dangerous that the Galactic Council had hidden it away and pretended it did not exist. Lieutenant Bo Ram checked her tablet again. The young officer had been monitoring space around the asteroid for any signs of other ships. They were alone out here in the darkness between stars. Just the way it had to be. If anyone else found out what they were doing, it would cause panic across the galaxy. First security door opened with a soft hiss. The air inside was cold and stale, like a tomb that had been sealed for thousands of years. Emergency lights flickered on, showing a narrow hallway that led deeper into the asteroid. Ancient symbols were carved into the wall, symbols that none of them recognized. As they walked deeper, the security systems became more complex. Laser scanners checked their DNA, blood samples were taken, and analyzed machines that looked like weapons pointed at them. From hidden places in the walls, whatever was down here, someone had really wanted to keep it safe. The second door was even thicker than the first, made from some kind of metal that seemed to glow with its own light. The warning signs here were different, written in languages so old that even Dr. Soo-jin had trouble reading them. The message was clear, though: keep out or face the consequences. Captain Hyun-woo placed his hand on the scanner. The machine made soft beeping sounds as it checked his identity. Then it asked for voice confirmation. He spoke clearly into the microphone, saying the secret words that had been passed down through generations of security officers. Finally, the great vault door began to open. The sound it made was like thunder rolling across the mountains. Steam hissed out as the ancient seals broke. Light from inside spilled into the corridor. A soft blue glow that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Inside the vault was almost empty, just a single pedestal in the center of the room. On top of it floated a small crystal data storage device. It was old, very old, but it still worked. The crystal turned slowly in the air, surrounded by energy fields that kept it safe. Warning messages filled the air around them. Holographic displays showed danger symbols and words in bright red letters: extreme caution, extinction level, threat, authorized personnel only. The messages flashed and blinked, demanding their attention. Dr. Soo-jin moved closer to the crystal. Her scanner showed that the data inside was intact but encrypted. The encryption was unlike anything she had seen before, complex beyond understanding. It would take their best computers days to break through the security, but as she worked, something strange happened. The crystal began to glow brighter. The energy fields around it started to change color, and slowly, very slowly, the data began to decrypt itself, as if it was waiting for someone to find it. The first thing that appeared on their screens was a title, written in symbols that made no sense. The letters were simple and primitive compared to the elegant writing used by advanced civilizations. But there was something about them that made everyone in the room feel uncomfortable. Lieutenant Bo Ram was the first to recognize what they were looking at. She had studied ancient history and dead languages as part of her training. Her face went pale as she read the strange symbols out loud. "These symbols, they come from a world called Earth," she whispered. "The planet that destroyed itself thousands of years ago, but that is impossible. Earth has been dead for 3,000 years. How can there be a file this old written in their language?" The title became clear as the translation program worked. The most restricted file in the Galactic network was written in English below. That in smaller text was something even more disturbing. "Property of the Terran Defense Initiative, emergency protocol when all else fails." Captain Hyun-woo felt his blood Turn to ICE. The Terran Defense Initiative was a Legend A story told to frighten children about a military force so powerful that it could destroy entire star systems, but it was just a story. Earth was a dead world full of radioactive ruins. As more of the file decrypted, the terrible truth became clear. The humans had not destroyed themselves in nuclear war, they had faked their own extinction. They had made everyone believe they were dead while they prepared for something much worse. The file contained detailed plans for warfare unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, methods so brutal and effective that reading them made experienced military officers feel sick. These were not the tactics of civilized beings, these were the methods of monsters. Dr. Sujin continued reading, her voice getting quieter with each line. The document described something called Total War, a way of fighting that treated the enemy not as fellow beings but as problems to be solved through complete destruction. There were plans for weapons that could kill entire planets, instructions for biological warfare that would make species extinct forever, methods for psychological warfare that would drive enemies insane with fear. The humans had thought of everything. The most frightening part was a section called Human Nature in Combat. It explained how humans became more dangerous when they were losing, how they would sacrifice everything to protect their families, how they saw surrender as something that happened to other people, never to them. Lieutenant Biorem checked her scanners again. Something was wrong. The file had been accessed recently. Someone else knew about this place. Someone else had been reading these terrible secrets before anyone could respond. Alarms began ringing throughout the base. Their ship sensors detected another vessel approaching. It was huge, unlike anything in their databases. The design was strange, focusing on function rather than beauty. Captain Hyun-woo tried to contact the unknown ship. His voice shook as he spoke into the communication system. Unknown vessel. This is Captain Hyun-woo of the research ship Eternal Dawn. Please identify yourself. The answer came back in perfect Galactic standard language, but the accent was wrong. It sounded like someone trying to speak normally but not quite succeeding. The voice was calm and confident in a way that made everyone afraid. This is Commander Jackson of the Terran Remnant Fleet. We have come to take back what belongs to us. Through the window they could see the alien ship moving closer. Its hull was covered in scars from battles. The metal was dark and twisted in ways that no modern ship ever was. Along its side, in the same primitive writing as the file, were the words UNSC Defiance. The humans had returned, and they had been preparing for war for 3,000 years. Dr. Sujin looked at the file still glowing on their screens. Then she looked at the approaching warship. Everything they thought they knew about history was wrong. The humans were not extinct. They were not primitive. They were something much more dangerous. They were survivors, and now they were coming home. Commander Jackson's face appeared on the main screen of the Eternal Dawn. The bridge crew stared in shock at the human who looked almost like them. 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, all arranged in familiar patterns, but there was something different about his expression, something cold and hard that none of them had ever seen before. His eyes held secrets, dark knowledge of violence and death that peaceful galactic citizens could not understand. Commander Jackson looked like someone who had seen terrible things and done worse things to survive. We know you opened the file, he said calmly. We have been watching that vault for decades, waiting for someone to finally discover the truth. Congratulations, Captain Hyun-woo. You are the first to learn what really happened to Earth. Captain Hyun-woo struggled to find words. The records say Earth was destroyed in nuclear war 3,000 years ago. How are you still alive? Where have you been hiding, Commander? Jackson smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The reports of our death were carefully planned. We wanted everyone to believe we had wiped ourselves out, so the galaxy would leave us alone. We needed time to prepare. Dr. Sujin stepped forward, her scientific mind overcoming her fear. Prepare for what? What could be so important that you would fake the extinction of your entire species for the return of the Devourers? Jackson replied, and somehow the room felt colder. The ancient enemy that your Galactic Council has been lying about for 3,000 years. The Devourers were not destroyed. They were only driven back to the edge of the galaxy, and now they are coming back. Lieutenant Biram worked frantically at her computer, searching through all the databases she could access. There is no record of any species called Devourers, she said, confused. Of course there is not, Jackson said with bitter anger. The Council erased them from history after we helped defeat them the first time. They were afraid that if people knew the truth, it would cause panic across the galaxy, so they rewrote the history books and made us the villains instead. The human commander gestured to someone off-screen. New data began flooding into the eternal dawn. Computers, images of massive creatures filled their displays, things that looked like giant insects with razor-sharp claws and acid dripping from their mouths. Ships that seemed grown rather than built appeared on screen. Their hulls were covered in organic armor that pulsed with unnatural life. These vessels looked alive, like they were breathing in the vacuum of space. These are the real monsters, Jackson continued, a hive mind that eats entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty space behind them. They do not talk, they do not take prisoners. They do not follow any rules of war. When they return, your civilized way of fighting will get everyone killed, Captain. He felt sick to his stomach. Why should we believe you? How do we know you are telling the truth? Because we have proof, Jackson said grimly. Our deep space monitoring stations detected their scout ships 3 months ago. They are testing our defenses, looking for weak points. The main fleet will arrive within 1 year. The bridge fell silent as everyone understood what this meant. If the humans were telling the truth, then the galaxy was about to face an enemy that none of their peaceful civilizations were prepared to fight. What do you want from us? Dr. Sujin asked quietly. We want you to help us prepare for war, Jackson replied. Real war, not the formal battles your species call conflicts. We have spent 3,000 years learning how to destroy our enemies. But we cannot fight the Devourers alone. We need allies who are willing to learn. Lieutenant Bo Ram looked at the tactical information filling her screens. The human ships carried weapons that violated every peace treaty the galaxy had signed. Nuclear missiles that could destroy cities, kinetic weapons that could shatter planets, energy weapons that could boil oceans. Your weapons are illegal, she said. Our weapons work, Jackson replied. When the Devourers come, they will not care about your treaties or your laws. They will care about one thing: how fast they can consume your worlds, and the only way to stop them is to fight fire with fire. Captain Heian-Wu made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Show us what you know. Jackson nodded with approval. The first lesson is simple: forget everything you think you know about warfare. The Devourers do not follow rules, and neither can we. They do not show mercy, and neither can we. They fight to consume, and we fight to survive. The human commander's image flickered as his ship's computer connected to the Eternal Dawn training systems. Suddenly, the peaceful research vessel was filled with information about weapons of mass destruction, nuclear deployment tactics, biological warfare, chemical weapons. Something called total war doctrine. This is madness, Dr. Sujin whispered as she read about poison gas and disease weapons. This is survival, Jackson replied. Your ancestors lived because they learned to be predators when they had to. You have forgotten that lesson, but we have not. We have carried the burden of being the galaxy's monsters so that when the real monsters return, we would be ready. As the data transfer continued, Captain Heian-Wu realized that everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. They were not the primitive warmongers that history books described. They were guardians who had given up their place in galactic society to prepare for a threat that everyone else had chosen to forget. The Devourers will be here soon, Jackson said, and when they arrive you will understand why that file was classified. You will understand why we had to become monsters, because sometimes the only way to fight monsters is to become something even worse. Lieutenant Bo Ram detected movement on her sensors. More human ships were arriving, each one scarred and battle-ready. Their weapons were already charging with energy that made space itself seem to bend around them. This is your choice, Jackson continued. Join us and learn to fight like humans, or stay peaceful and watch your civilization get consumed. The Devourers are coming whether you are ready or not. The war room aboard the human flagship Retribution looked like nothing Captain Heian-Wu had ever seen before. Every surface was covered with tactical displays, showing star charts, weapon configurations, and enemy movement patterns. Everything was designed for one purpose: killing as efficiently as possible. Devourers are not just another hostile alien species, explained Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief scientist of the Terran Remnant fleet. Her Korean was perfect, learned from decades of monitoring. Galactic communications, they are something far worse. They are a biological weapon that escaped control millions of years ago. Jana, the young tactical officer who had joined them from the Eternal Dawn, stared at the holographic display showing a devourer bioship. The creature was massive, easily the size of a small moon, with thousands of smaller organisms swimming around it like fish around a whale. Who created them? She asked with a shaking voice. We do not know, Dr. Vasquez replied. The species that made them died long ago, consumed by their own creation. What we do know is that they are perfectly designed to eat and reproduce. They consume everything: metal, organic matter, even energy itself, and every time they eat something they grow stronger and smarter. Dr. Sujin, who had been studying the biological data, looked up from her computer with horror on her face. This is impossible. Nothing can survive by eating everything it breaks, the basic laws of nature. That is what makes them so dangerous. Vasquez said they do not follow natural laws. They were built to be the perfect predator, and they have been improving themselves for millions of years. The holographic display changed to show the devourer life cycle. It started with scout organisms, no bigger than insects, but as they consumed matter, they grew rapidly. Within days, they could become the size of buildings. Within weeks, they could eat entire cities. The worst part, Jackson continued, is how they reproduce. They do not just eat you. They take your biological and technological knowledge and add it to their own. Every species they consume makes them stronger and more adaptable. Lieutenant Oram, who had been watching long-range sensors, suddenly went pale. Captain, we are detecting movement in the outer rim. Multiple large objects moving toward the galactic core. Jackson's expression became darker. How many? At least 50, sir. Each one is roughly the size of a small planet. The room fell silent. Even the humans who had been preparing for this moment for 3,000 years seemed shocked by the size of the threat. That is just the first wave, Jackson said grimly. Our intelligence suggests they have hundreds more. Where those came from, maybe thousands. Dr. Vasquez activated another display showing mathematical calculations. If they reach the inner colonies, they will consume the entire galaxy within 50 years. And that is, if we manage to slow them down. Captain Hyun Woo felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. What can we do against something like this? We fight, Jackson replied simply. We use every weapon we have, every tactic we have learned, and we make them pay for every world they take. But first we need to convince the Galactic Council that this threat is real. The tactical display showed the location of the Council's main fleet, still gathered around their homeworlds in the galactic core. They had no idea what was coming for them. They will not believe us, Dr. Sujin said. The Council has spent centuries building a peaceful civilization. They have forgotten how to fight. Then we will have to teach them, Jackson replied. And we will have to do it fast. Jana was studying the devourer movement patterns when she noticed something strange. Commander, these formations do not make sense. They are not spreading out to cover maximum territory. They are hurting something. Jackson moved to her console and looked at the data. His face went white. They are not just attacking randomly, they are driving refugee populations toward the galactic core. They want to concentrate their food supply. The implications were terrible. The devourers were not just mindless monsters. They were smart enough to use strategy. They were planning to force billions of beings into a small area where they could be eaten more efficiently. We need to warn the outer colonies, Captain Hyun Woo said. Give them time to evacuate. Evacuate to where? Jackson asked. The devourers are faster than our ships. Running will only delay what happens next. Dr. Vasquez pulled up another display showing human battle tactics. This is why we developed the strategies in that classified file. Against an enemy like this, normal warfare is useless. We need to think like predators. The display showed human forces using hit-and-run tactics, destroying devourer scout ships with nuclear weapons, using biological weapons to slow their advance. It was brutal, efficient, and completely against every rule of civilized warfare the galaxy will never accept. These methods, Dr. Sujin said. Then the galaxy will die, Jackson replied coldly. The devourers do not care about your moral principles. They do not talk, they do not take prisoners, and they certainly do not show mercy. The only language they understand is violence. A new alarm began sounding throughout the ship. Lieutenant Oram's voice came over the intercom. All hands, battle stations. We have incoming devourer scouts. Through the window they could see them, dozens of organic ships that looked like Giant insects, their hulls pulsed with strange lights. They moved with disturbing grace as if they were swimming through space rather than flying. This is it, Jackson said, his voice grim but determined. Your first lesson in how to fight monsters, remember? Everything you learned about civilized warfare, and then forget it. These things only understand death. The human ships moved to attack, their weapons charging with sounds like thunder. For the first time in 3,000 years, humanity was about to show the galaxy what they had become in the darkness between the stars. The first shots of the new war were fired at 0347 Galactic Standard Time, Commander. Jackson's voice cut through the chaos on the bridge of the Retribution as Devourer scouts swarmed toward the small human fleet. Target the nerve clusters, he commanded. Do not waste ammunition on the armor plating. These things feel pain, and pain makes them sloppy, Captain. Han Wu watched in fascination and horror as the human weapon systems came online. Unlike the elegant energy weapons used by galactic civilizations, these were crude, brutal instruments of destruction. Nuclear-tipped missiles streaked through space, followed by streams of metal rounds that moved so fast they seemed to bend space around them. Why do you not use energy weapons? Asked Dr. Su Jin, who was monitoring the battle from the tactical station. Because energy can be absorbed and redirected, replied Lieutenant Sarah Chun, the human weapons officer. The Devourers learned to feed on plasma blasts centuries ago. But they cannot digest uranium, and they definitely cannot process nuclear fission. The first Devourer scout ship took a direct hit from a nuclear missile. Instead of exploding like a normal vessel, it seemed to shake its organic hull, rippling like water. Then it began to dissolve its biological parts, breaking down at the smallest level. That is impossible, whispered Jinnah. Nothing dies that easily. That is what everyone thought, Jackson said grimly, until we learned that the Devourer's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They adapt to everything, which means they are weak against anything they have not seen before. The battle continued for 3 hours. The human ships moved with precision that spoke of countless drills and real combat experience. They used tactics that no galactic military academy taught, ramming damaged enemy vessels, using their own ships as decoys, coordinating attacks that required perfect timing. This is how we have survived for 3,000 years. Jackson explained as his ship barely avoided a bioplasma blast. We learned to think like they do. We learned to be ruthless. When the last Devourer scout was destroyed, the human fleet regrouped, but instead of celebrating their victory, Jackson's expression grew more serious. That was just a test, he said. They were checking our defenses, learning our capabilities. The real attack will come soon. Lieutenant Bahram, who had been monitoring long-range sensors, confirmed his fears. I am detecting massive movement in the outer rim, hundreds of large objects moving in formation. The main display showed the approaching Devourer fleet. Each ship was the size of a small moon, covered in organic armor that pulsed with evil life. Around them swarmed millions of smaller organisms, creating a cloud of death that stretched across several light years. How do we fight something like that? Captain Han Wu asked. We do not, Jackson replied. We slow them down while we prepare the galaxy for total war. The human commander opened a communication link to the Galactic Council. The response was immediate and predictably dismissive. Commander Jackson, came the voice of Chancellor Vexstar, the current leader of the Council. Your species was declared extinct 3 millennia ago. This communication is impossible. The reports of our death were greatly exaggerated. Jackson replied coldly. We are sending tactical data about the Devourer threat. You need to mobilize your fleets immediately. The Devourers are a myth, Vexstar said dismissively. A story told to frighten children. They were destroyed long ago. Then explain this, Jackson said, sending real-time footage of the approaching fleet. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Vexstar spoke again, his voice shaking. This cannot be real. It is real, Jackson confirmed, and it is coming for all of us. You have maybe 6 months before they reach the inner colonies. I suggest you use that time wisely. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. Chancellor, we are prepared to share our tactical knowledge with your forces, but you need to understand fighting the Devourers requires methods that your civilizations have never used. What kind of methods? Vexstar asked suspiciously. Total war, Jackson replied. No rules, no mercy, no surrender. We fight with everything we have, using every weapon we can find. The Chancellor's image flickered with outrage. You are talking about breaking every treaty in galactic law, chemical weapons, biological warfare weapons of mass destruction. These things are forbidden for good reason. They are forbidden because you never faced an enemy that forced you to use them, Jackson said. The Devourers do not follow your laws. They do not respect your treaties. They exist for one purpose, to consume everything in their path. Captain Haiyan Wu found himself speaking up. Chancellor, I have seen the evidence. The humans are telling the truth. If we do not act now, the galaxy will fall, and you trust these savages? Vextar asked. I trust results. Captain Haiyan Wu replied, they just destroyed a Devourer scout force without losing a single ship. Can your fleet say the same? The Chancellor was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke very well. Send your tactical data, but I want it understood any breaking of galactic law will be met with the full force of the Council fleet. Chancellor Jackson said quietly, when the Devourers arrive, there will not be a Council fleet, there will not be a Council. There will only be survivors and the consumed. I suggest you decide which one you want to. The communication ended. Dr. Sujin turned to Jackson. You could have been more diplomatic. Diplomacy is a luxury we cannot afford, Jackson replied. The Devourers will be here soon, and when they arrive, the galaxy will learn what humanity has always known. Sometimes the only way to save civilization is to become temporarily uncivilized. Human ships began moving into formation, their weapons charging with energy that made space itself glow. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between war and total war, and humanity was ready to be the teacher. The first Devourer attack came at dawn on Nexus Prime, the industrial heart of the galactic economy. The planet's peaceful people had no idea what was coming until the bioships blocked out their sun. Commander Jackson watched the real-time footage from the bridge of the Retribution, his face grim. The Galactic Defense Fleet had positioned themselves according to standard military rules. Elegant formations designed for ceremonial battles between civilized species. They were completely unprepared for what happened next. They are not even trying to avoid casualties, whispered Dr. Sujin as she watched Devourer ships ram straight through the defensive lines. The organic vessels absorbed the energy weapon impacts like sponges, then released the stored energy as bioplasma that melted through metal like acid. Within 30 minutes, the entire galactic defense fleet was either destroyed or running away. The Devourers descended on Nexus Prime like a plague of insects, their feeding arms reaching from orbit to begin consuming the planet's surface. How long? Asked Captain Haiyan Wu. This rate may be 18 hours, Jackson replied. Then they will move on to the next system. The communication channels exploded with panic as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Devourers were not just attacking military targets, they were systematically consuming every planet in their path. Entire star systems were going dark as the organic ships stripped them of all useful matter. Chancellor Vextar's image appeared on the main screen, his normally calm appearance replaced by barely controlled terror. Commander Jackson, we need your help. Our fleets are being destroyed faster than we can deploy them. I told you this would happen, Jackson said without satisfaction. Are you ready to listen? Now, yes, Vextar said quietly. What do you need? Complete control over all galactic military forces, Jackson replied. No interference, no second guessing, and no limits on weapons or tactics. That is impossible. The Council will never agree to. The Council is dead, Jackson interrupted. Half of them have already been consumed, the other half are refugees. You can either give me what I need to fight this war, or you can watch your civilization die. The Chancellor was quiet for a long moment. Finally he nodded. You have full authority. May our ancestors forgive us. Jackson immediately began giving orders. All civilian populations are to be moved to the Galactic Core. Military forces will establish defensive positions at key points throughout the spiral arms, and I want every weapon of mass destruction in the galaxy brought online. Commander protested Admiral Kethvar, the surviving head of the Galactic Navy. Many of those weapons have not been used in centuries. They are considered barbaric tactics for barbaric enemies, Jackson replied. The Devourers do not understand civilization, they only understand force. The next phase of the war began with the Battle of Kepler Station, a massive space facility that controlled shipping lanes throughout the inner colonies. The Devourers approached with their usual swarm tactics, expecting to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers. They were not prepared for humanity's response. The first wave of bioships ran straight into a minefield of nuclear weapons. The explosions created a wall of radiation that burned through their organic armor. Like fire through paper, those that survived the initial blast found themselves facing something even worse: biological weapons specifically designed to target their cellular structure. This is against every law of civilized warfare, Admiral Kethvar said as he watched Devourer ships dissolving into organic soup. Civilized warfare is what got your fleets destroyed. Jackson replied, "This is survival warfare." The battle lasted for days. The humans used every dirty trick they had learned in 3 millennia of preparation. They rammed damaged ships into enemy formations, used chemical weapons to poison the bioships. Atmosphere deployed kinetic weapons that hurled chunks of metal at incredible speeds, but the Devourers were learning too. They adapted to the nuclear weapons, developing radiation-resistant armor. They countered the biological weapons with enhanced immune systems. They even began copying human tactics, using their own damaged ships as suicide weapons. They are getting smarter, observed Dr. Vasquez as she analyzed the combat data. Each wave is more effective than the last. Then we need to get nastier. Jackson said, "Signal the Defiance, tell them to prepare the Nova Bombs." Nova Bombs were humanity's ultimate weapon, devices that could trigger stellar collapse, turning entire star systems into weapons. They had been developed during the darkest days of the war with the Devourers, when it became clear that no sacrifice was too great to prevent galactic extinction. "You cannot be serious," Captain Hyung-woo said. "Those weapons could destroy entire civilizations. Those civilizations are already dead." Jackson replied, "The Devourers consumed them 3 hours ago. Now we use their deaths to save everyone else." The Nova Bomb exploded in the heart of the Devourer fleet, triggering a chain reaction that turned the system star into a supernova. The explosion vaporized hundreds of bioships and created a radiation barrier that would prevent Devourer expansion for decades. It also killed every living thing in 3-star systems. "This is what war really looks like," Jackson said as they watched the stellar explosion on their screens. "Not the formal duels you call battles, but the complete destruction of everything you hold dear in service of a greater cause." The galaxy was learning the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the only way to preserve life is to become very, very good at taking it. The war that would later be called the Second Devourer conflict lasted 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. When it ended, the galaxy was forever changed. Commander Jackson stood in the ruins of what had once been the Galactic Council chambers, now serving as the command center for the Terran Galactic Alliance. The elegant architecture had been replaced by functional military installations, and the peaceful debates that once echoed through these halls had been replaced by the constant chatter of military communications. "Final casualty reports," announced Dr. Sujin, who had become the Alliance's chief intelligence officer. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held the weight of everything they had witnessed. 47 star systems completely consumed, 31 systems made uninhabitable by our own weapons. Estimated civilian casualties, 2.7 billion beings. Captain Hyun-woo, now admiral of the rebuilt Galactic Fleet, studied the strategic display. The spiral arms of the galaxy were scarred with dead zones where stars had been put out and planets reduced to lifeless rocks. "What about the Devourers?" "Complete extinction," Jackson replied. "The final nest was destroyed 6 hours ago. Our bioweapons were successful in preventing their reproduction cycle. The victory had come at a terrible cost. The galaxy's peaceful civilizations had been forced to abandon everything they believed in about warfare and morality. They had used chemical weapons, biological warfare, and weapons of mass destruction on a scale that would have been unthinkable before the war. "The question now," said Chancellor Vextar, one of the few council members to survive the conflict, "is what happens next. The galaxy has seen what we are capable of when we embrace total war. Some are calling for the humans to be exiled again." Jackson's expression did not change. "And what do you think should happen?" "I think," Vextar said quietly, "that we need to remember why we fought. The Devourers were not defeated by our superior technology or our greater numbers. They were defeated by our willingness to become something we never wanted to be." Dr. Vasquez, who had spent the war developing increasingly horrible weapons, looked up from her research station. "The biological samples we collected showed that the Devourers were already developing defenses against our attacks. If the war had lasted another year, they might have developed immunity to everything we used. then we would have found new ways to kill them, Jackson said. Simply, that is what humans do. We adapt, we overcome, and we survive. Lieutenant B.O. Ram, now a full commander, brought news from the outer colonies. The refugee resettlement programs are showing good progress. Most of the survivors are adapting to their new worlds, though there is still some cultural shock. The cultural shock was understandable. The war had mixed populations that had been separated for thousands of years, forcing them to work together in ways that would have been impossible before the crisis. The rigid systems and species separation that had defined galactic society for centuries had crumbled in the face of necessity. There is something else, Admiral Hyan-Wu said. The deep space monitoring stations are picking up strange signals from beyond the galactic rim. Something is out there, and it is not devourers. Jackson studied the data with interest. Could be refugees from other galaxies. The devourers were not unique to our region of space, or it could be something worse, Dr. Sujin said grimly. The universe is vast, and we have only explored a tiny fraction of it. The room fell silent as everyone thought about what this meant. They had just fought the most devastating war in galactic history, only to discover that there might be even greater threats waiting in the darkness between galaxies. So what do we do? Asked Vexstar. We prepare, Jackson replied. We build better weapons, train better soldiers, and make sure that the next time something tries to destroy our civilization, we are ready for it. And if that makes us monsters, Admiral Hyan-Wu asked, then we will be monsters. Jackson said, but we will be living monsters in a galaxy full of life rather than noble corpses in a dead universe. The restricted file that had started everything was no longer classified. Its contents had been distributed to every military academy and research institution in the galaxy. The tactics and strategies that had once been too dangerous to share were now required reading for anyone who wanted to understand the true nature of warfare. Future generations will judge us harshly, Vexstar said. They will say we abandoned our principles. Future generations will exist because we abandoned our principles. Jackson replied, that is a trade I am willing to make. As the meeting ended and the various officials returned to their duties, Jackson remained alone in the command center. The weight of command of the decisions he had made and the prices he had paid pressed down on him like a physical force. Dr. Sujin approached him quietly. Any regrets? Jackson looked out at the stars, many of which were now dark because of actions he had ordered every day, but regret is a luxury that comes after survival. We survived, and that means we did what we had to do, and the next time, Jackson said, we will be ready. Because that is what the file was really about, not just tactics or weapons, but the understanding that sometimes the only way to preserve what you love is to become something you hate. The galaxy was at peace again, but it was a different kind of peace. It was the peace of predators who had learned to hunt, of civilizations that had discovered the savage strength that lay sleeping in their souls. They had paid the price for their survival, and they would never again be the innocent beings they had once been. But they would be alive, and in a universe full of monsters that was victory enough. The restricted file remained in its vault, but now it was studied rather than hidden. The galaxy had learned its most important lesson. Sometimes the only way to remain human is to become temporarily inhuman, and humanity had been the teacher they never wanted but desperately needed.